seat and turn off your cell phone. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming. My name is Jade Riley. I'm with RWAP, and we have a really jam-packed program for you today. We have our dignitaries here, our Connie Cantelmi, Phil Good, Steve Blair, and Greg Mingrelli. We also have some dignitaries in the office. In the room. Jim Lamerson is here, City Councilman. Pam Jones, she's the government appointed something on the medical board.
State medical board.
Okay. Sherry Hanna, who's our first vice president. Elsie Tyree, who's our second vice president of RWAP. And Linda Nichols, our president, and co-griller today, along with Billy Ford, councilman. Yeah. So I'm going to, we're going to have an opportunity to hear what the candidates say. We have questions that are going to be picked at random, and they will have to answer at random. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. I know it takes a lot of effort to come here today, and it's so good to see all of you that have joined us. So thank you for that, because we really want to make these forums something that you want to attend and something that gives you information that helps you be a more informed citizen. So what we're going to do today is, I'm going to first go over the rules. I'll do half the rules and Billy will do the other half of the rules. So we're going to go through those first before we start the forum. So the opening is going to be a quick half a minute given to each candidate to answer a simple but interesting question. So I'm going to tell you this question right now so you can be thinking about it. The first question, to break the ice, is tell us one thing about you that we do not know. We've heard a lot from these candidates, so I think they're going to have to dig deep and come up with that. But that's how we're going to start out. That'll help them, you know, get acquainted with our questions. And they do get harder than that, by the way. I don't know. That would be really interesting. It might be considered cheating.
Have her answer that question.
Yeah. So what we have done is we have created 16 questions, 2 of which are kind of easy. So if somebody gets those, you might have a little bit of a break. But most of them are pretty pertinent and pretty difficult to answer and do go along with everything we're doing in the city today. So we're going to try to get more information from these candidates so we can be informed voters. Those will be 4 questions each at 1.5 minutes for each candidate. So 1.5 minutes to answer those questions, and then Billy's going to talk to you about how you can extend your time if you need to.
We're going to have some fun today. One of the things we're going to do is to give each candidate 3 wild cards. And each wild card, Linda, 45 seconds? 45 seconds we decided. So Linda and I have been working on this for a couple of weeks. So 45 seconds, and they can use that 45 seconds to have a rebuttal to something that someone else said. Or, gosh, I wish I'd have had that question, so let me give my answer to that question. Or they can hold on to them and have some extra time. Now I remember the gubernatorial candidates when we had this a couple of years ago, and they had wild cards, and Ken Bennett used his wild card like bang, bang, bang. And then Ken goes, can I buy some more? No, you cannot buy any more wild cards. So once you use your 3 wild cards, they are gone. But they're a little more fun to use them during the forum rather than at the very end. So you could save them and add those 45 seconds to your last time. So what else, Linda? The closing?
Yep, just the closing.
And closing will be 1.5 minutes each of you to give your remarks. And like I said, you could add your wild cards for another 45 seconds. So, any questions?
I do want to recognize two people. Jade Riley is going to be our timekeeper. So, gentlemen and lady, we would love for you to keep an eye on Jade, and she has little signs, 15-second signs and stop signs. And she has a good little clock there and a bell. So when you hear the bell, you just have to end your conversation. And that means you're out of time. And
So the other that we're going to do, everybody gets 3. Right, we have those handed out. But you got 3 there, Chris? You got 2. Now you need 1 more.
are you sure?
1 more. And what position are you running for? No. Thank you. All righty. And 3 for Mr. Good, and we have 3 for Connie. So the other is that we've written these questions in such a way that I think that they cover all the areas of different areas for the city. And we have also, we're going to pull a name out. The first thing we're going to do is pull the question out. So there's no specific order for the question. We'll pull out the question, and then we will pull out a name. And so you're not going to have all respond to the same question, which is was our intent. So let's pull out a question. Linda, you want to grab the first one?
Okay. Well, this is a basket of 16 questions, so I'll grab one at random.
You want to do the first one?
Oh, I got a nice short one.
Okay.
Wait,
Okay, so.
aren't you supposed to do something that we don't know
Oh,
about?
we're going to do the introduction first of all.
Oh,
Tell us one thing. Thank you, Lynn. Tell us one thing that we don't know about you in half a minute.
thanks, Lynn.
Here you go, Connie. You know, it might help if you stand up. I just think it helps if you stand up so people in the back can see you.
Okay. Well, I do have one shocking thing that you probably don't know about me. And it happened a long time ago when I was a child. So for my first 25 years, I was a horsewoman. I used to buy horses from the racetrack and train them into hunter jumpers. I competed in 3-day eventing. I lived in England for 6 years, and I was on my way to the Olympics. I missed the point by 3 points. So that's how I spent my childhood in a barn up until I was 51 years old and I had a bad fall. So that's the thing you don't know.
Nice.
Well, I guess the one thing most people don't know, especially now, since this happened about 30 years ago, but I was a 3-time champion on tic-tac-toe. And I was also on the first season of Jeopardy with Alex Trebek.
Nice.
So having somewhat of a vast capacity for trivial knowledge, I'm hoping that might be of some value on city council.
I'm sure it will.
Well, I was warned to be careful what I might say. But most people know that I'm a born and raised native, but I would have to say most people don't know because it's not a hospital anymore. I was born at the old community hospital on Larkin Street, which was the old county annex building, and is sitting fallow today. It used to be a Jefferson School, so pretty proud of that, being born up there on the hill. And I could share with you a lot of other stories, but I think they'd be more appropriate if we do it one-on-one.
Well, I grew up in Kansas on several different farms, and so one of the things we did every morning was milk a cow. So we'd let the cow out, we had a pan of feed, my brother and I'd get on either side, and we'd milk that cow. We made butter with that milk. I was a shepherd actually in college, is how I put myself through college, is I was a shepherd at Kansas State University. But the craziest thing was one night in Kansas, I was hit by a flying cow and it totaled my car. I don't have enough time to tell you how that happened, but it literally was, Mom, shake your head, yes, it was a flying cow.
Very good. Thank you. Nice job, everybody. All right, here we go with our questions.
So I'll read the question, and then Sherry Hannah's going to help us by picking a name. And when we go through all 4 names, we'll put them back in the basket and then go for more questions. So the first question is, what are your thoughts on using the utility enterprise funds to help pay for PSPRS? And this question goes to
Feel good.
Feel Good.
Okay, here you go.
Gee, that's a surprise. Well, I think now that the 443 issue has been decided, we have a substantial amount of financial resources to deal with the PSPRS liability and the ability to pay it down significantly over the next 10 years. Accessing excess capital improvement funds and utility funds are a financial resource, but it's not necessarily needed at this time. It's nice to know that they could be accessed, although they're there for a reason, and they're there to support those capital projects, and they should be almost one of the very last resorts we use. So I think at this point, my answer would be no, we don't need them. 443 should provide sufficient resources, and I applaud the council for their vote in accessing some of those general fund reserves. Thank you.
We have a wild card.
Do we have a wild card? All right,
All
we're
right.
gonna move on.
All right, next question. All righty. Jim Robb recently spoke at our last forum. How will you support the efforts he is proposing regarding economic development for Prescott and the surrounding area?
This goes to Connie.
Connie can tell me.
I love Jim Robb. I think Jim Robb is probably, since I've been around here for many, many years, maybe 14 years now personally, but 1972 is when my family came here. He's one of the most positive, forward-thinking people I've met down at the city, and I think he's got a lot of wonderful, wonderful ideas. Although, again, as I've said in many of the forums, this is one piece of the puzzle. We do need to elevate the tax base. In order to do that, we've got to promote economic development. I'd like to also see a little more promotion going to our businesses that are currently here. I think they need help. We need that. We need an elevation of the tax base. We need that airport. There's just a few components that we've got to enhance in the downtown area. I've been talking about cleaning up the downtown, taking care of our roads, preserving our history. That's the other thing. We've got this large amount of money coming from tourism, and I know Jim Robb feels the same way about that. We've got to preserve what these people are coming here to see. So I am 100% behind Jim Robb on everything he says about the economic development. Tapping into these colleges, it's a no-brainer. We've got some of the smartest minds here at all three colleges, and they leave. And to attest to that, I can tell you, I've got 8 and one step niece and nephew that were born and raised here, went to school here, and every single one of them have left. I have one that just came back because she had a baby and she got married to a local guy, but they're all educated. They've all got degrees. They've got master's degrees, and they needed to go somewhere else to get a high-paying job. So we've got to work on that. Thank you.
Thanks. Any wild cards?
Come on, guys. All right, here we go. Next question. This past Tuesday, the Prescott City Council voted 5-2. Mayor Oberg and Councilwoman Wilcox voting no. The council voted to send $11 million of the general fund reserves to begin to pay down Prescott's $78.5 million to the PSPRS debt. If you had been on the council, what would you have voted on? How would you have voted on this issue, and why? And that goes to
Greg.
Greg Mangarelli.
Well, I was very grateful that 443 passed. I supported Proposition 443, and a little surprised actually at how overwhelming that support was. It was great to be at that council meeting that night on Tuesday to hear the debate. I fully supported the 5 council members who did vote for the $11 million to go to the unfunded liability. I've said all along during my campaign that in order for this to work, we have to use the Proposition 443 money to pay down the unfunded liability. Then we need to find as much money as we can, whether it's in rainy day funds or the general fund, to continue to pile on to the unfunded liability and get that paid down. So I was very grateful and would support that kind of decision to send that $11 million to PSPRS and pay that off as quickly as we can. I would say that it's important to know that even with the $11 million from the reserve going, because you kind of cringe a little bit thinking, oh my gosh, we're sending $11 million of our reserve that we might need in an emergency. But I was very comforted to know that we have nearly $12 million left in reserve with the city for those kinds of emergencies. And that is twice the amount that the Council on Governments would require us to have in place. And so I'm very comfortable with the 11.9 million that we still have in reserve. So I would have supported that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Any wild cards?
Wild card, right here. All right,
Oh,
wild card.
Woo.
Win?
We were just waiting to do that.
Here you go. Yay.
I spoke to the council regarding this issue when they took the vote on Tuesday. And although I have advocated the use of these really excessive reserves in the general fund, the Government Finance Officers Association recommends a minimum of a 20% reserve, and that has been set aside and designated in that reserve account. So we had an additional $16.5 million over and above that. So taking 11 of that 16.5 still leaves us with a very healthy reserve account. My concern was dumping $11 million into an equity-based finance pension fund at the top of the market. Anybody who monitors our equity markets know that we are at an all-time high for the Dow and the S&P 500, and generally you don't recommend putting a lump sum in a top. I recommended that they dollar cost average those into the market over the course of a year so you could smooth out and reduce the potential for a downside risk. So that decision has been made, but I would recommend that future tax money be considered in a dollar cost averaging approach. Thanks.
We'll give this to Steve.
Okay, this is the next question. And it is, Prescott continuously receives recognition for the best place to learn, live, work, and play. How do you suggest we prepare for an influx of community growth?
Well, I think that influx of community growth has been happening since I was in high school. If you want to talk about the number of people that were here back in 1974, you're talking about 18,000. Now we're at 40, and that's been over 40 years to get us to that point. So I think Prescott has been forward thinking in their long-range planning. I believe that what we're doing with the new developments and seeing those up front in their master plans is a very good thing. The onset of Prescott Lakes, when it was in the infancy of being developed, everybody said that was going to overblow the city of Prescott. However, most people that know Prescott Lakes, it's a very fine development. I think as long as we keep the quality high, our standards high, and continue to be Prescott the place people love to come, live, and play, I think we'll always have a good community, and our growth rate will continue, hopefully, to be 1% to 2% and not overfueled.
Thank you. Any wild cards
Wild cards?
on community growth?
No takers.
Okay,
All righty.
that was
here
an
we
easy
go.
one.
What's our next question here? I'm gonna get a short one. Oh. What are the pluses and minuses in allowing the Kirkland mine to reopen in Kirkland, Arizona? How could this affect the citizens of Prescott?
That goes to.
And that question goes to?
Feel good.
Feel good.
Good one.
Yeah, it's one of your issues.
Thank you very much. This is one of the issues I've been very concerned about. I've attended several of the community meetings on the Kirkland Mine Corporation's proposal to open up that mine down in Skull Valley. Currently, the proposal is to have about 20-ton trucks transversing Iron Springs Road up to Williamson Valley Road and then into Chino Valley, and as much as 100 trips, round trips, so that's 200 up and back trips per day. I have grave concerns about this. The traffic congestion and the safety of making that turn from Iron Springs onto Williamson Valley Road, where Abaya Judd and Granite Mountain Middle School are. Anybody who's gone there during the mornings or the afternoons know that the parents block one of the lanes of that traffic, and having all these trucks trying to safely make that turn is going to be very dangerous. Now you can add in the fact that this silicate fine material is going to be very difficult to contain and we're gonna get dust, we're gonna get noise, we're gonna get traffic. And think about it, if these contracted drivers are gonna try to deliver this material up to the Drake plant, and they can't make that turn in 1 or 2 signal lights, where are they gonna go? They're gonna go down Iron Springs and they're gonna turn on Willow Creek Road. Then it's gonna be affecting everybody. So I think the negatives far outweigh the positives, and I'm strongly against this plan.
Any wild cards?
Wild card.
Wild card.
No, we need your wild card
Oh.
first.
I just want to add too, with the Kirkland mine, recognizing that this woman that owns the mine, you know, she does have property rights. But the bottom line is, just as Phil said, it's the silica dust. We cannot take our health for granted. I don't think we can allow this. They've got to produce some kind of studies before I would ever agree to this. I have talked to a few people that know her personally, and I've asked them to talk to her and say, you know, why don't you be creative with that spot? There's a lot of other ways that mine can become money producing. I would say open up the mine for tourists. Make it a tourist attraction. We can go down there, put up a little Old West town. She can make money that way rather than polluting our air that we breathe. And as a cancer survivor, that would be the one and only issue that would make me believe that this is not good for Prescott.
Thank you, Connie. Any other wild cards? All right, we're going to move on to the next question. Deep Well Ranch has been in the news a lot lately. What are your thoughts regarding this new development of 10,000 new homes and commercial properties?
Connie can tell me.
Oh, okay. Again? Okay. I'm supporting the Deep Well Ranch project, and there's several reasons. Again, it goes with economic development, elevating our tax base, bringing people here that are going to contribute to our town, buy cars, eat at our restaurants, not take from us. And so these are the things that we need to do. But you have to remember one thing, that this isn't going to happen overnight. I know people have said, oh my God, 10,000 homes, it's going to happen overnight. Well, it really isn't. And I think it was Greg, you brought up a great analogy, the lakes, for example. I think they're going on 27 years from the time they started planning that development to today, and they're still not all built out. So it's going to be a very slow, managed growth. And I know I've been to all the planning and zoning committee meetings, Phil's on that group. They are trying to, the city is trying to remind the developer that we do have ordinances, we do have codes, and they're gonna have to comply with that. So that's what I call managed growth. I think we need it. We've really, really got to elevate the tax base, and we need those tax dollars so that our taxes don't go up. Thanks.
Thank you, Connie. Any wild cards? Ooh.
Hold on. Hold on. Wait, Steve. I need that. I need this. Wild card. You know, it's like what used to be the blue light at
There you go.
Kmart, yeah. Okay, there we go.
Just to add, I think it's important that long-range planning, I mentioned it once before, is the key to a very successful community. To make sure it's not done willy-nilly. You know, Yavapai Hills started many years ago and they're still not built out. They have quality homes, and a lot of folks have moved into the Ranch of Prescott Lakes, certainly out of Forest Trails. When I grew up, not one of these places was here. And to this day, we have some very fine developments in the city of Prescott. And I think the key is to keep the big city developer mentality out of Prescott and keep it the unique community that we all love and enjoy. So that means individual, unique homes that are built with quality, that aren't going to be some slum 10 years from now because people have decided to move out. So I think it's quality, paying attention to codes, and making sure that everybody out there is doing the right thing. And I support Ron James. He's given a lot to this community and millions of dollars to the Heart Institute there at Yavapai Regional, and also to the Elks Theater. They're a class family. He is not going to do anything in his mind to upset the values of Prescott, Arizona, especially on Mitzi James's ranch land out there. So I suspect you'll see a quality development out of Ron James.
Okay, we have another wild card.
I'm one of the commissioners for the city on the Planning and Zoning Commission. We've now had 5 hearings on this proposal. It's by far the largest development that has ever come before the commission, even long before I even arrived here. So we've looked at this in a lot of detail, and I'm concerned that it's offering too much authority to the developers. The number of developments coming into the city now seems to be stacking up, and we have to make sure that these developments are properly vetted so that they can be absorbed without causing traffic congestion and too much activity. Our ability to support these developments with infrastructure, police and fire services and things like that are based upon taxes from retail. And so we have to balance development with commercial development.
That's it.
So I think we have to be very careful.
Thank you.
Somebody have a cane?
45
Just
seconds
joking.
for details.
All right, we have a wild card.
I'm all in.
Here you go. All right, everybody, so far.
It's a party, might as well jump in. You know, Harvey Skoog is a good friend of mine. He's the mayor in Prescott Valley, and I've spoken to him recently, and he said, Greg, you know, growth is gonna happen with or without you. And it's always good to get ahead of it and to make it look like you want it to look. And that's what we're doing in Prescott with these developments, with Deepwell, and there's a few others that are on the table, as you know. And so I'm very excited about what we're going to be seeing with these developments. And understand, Connie mentioned it, but these are not gonna happen overnight. They're gonna be well thought out, and they're gonna be a part of our city, and so we'll get to be a part of what they look like, and we're gonna have some very high standards for these people, but they are gonna increase our tax base and help us in the long run. So I'm very excited about these developments and what we're seeing coming to the city of Prescott. If you look at Prescott Valley, they're about 40 years old, yet they're larger than we are now already.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I think we're all in on this one. Okay, here we go. Question. There has been a suggestion to add an additional position with the city for a code enforcement officer. What is your opinion, and do you agree or disagree, and why?
Steve.
Right. Go ahead.
I agree, and I support that 100%. I think we need to have 2 or 3 more. Right now, we have 1, and that one person is in charge of inspecting sober living homes, in charge of weed control, in charge of everything that is a law in the city of Prescott. We just need to do a better job out there. There's a lot of lots that are full of weeds, a lot of blight that's out there in different areas, but our police department's taxed with all their things that they do with their daily activity, and we have, one gentleman who's a retired police officer from Tempe that's our code enforcement officer, and you can't even try to get a hold of him on the phone because I think he lives in his car. But I think we do need to have a little bit more of a quality control on a lot of issues out there, and as long as we're gonna have sober homes and those types of things in our community, they need to be addressed by a code enforcement officer.
So you have a wild card on code enforcement officer.
I need a wild card. You gotta pay before you play.
I really need to speak to this issue. This has been one of my hot button items for years here in the city, for many reasons. And let me just tell you from a business standpoint, I ran a business for 35 years. In fact, I started 4 businesses in my lifetime. And I've had to abide by every rule and law in this country because we are a country of rules and laws. And when you have a few bad actors that infect or affect the rest of us, they should not be allowed to go forward. Now, that's what these ordinances are all about that Steve was talking about. We have ordinances that are on the books. Some of them are very old. They were put there for reasons. Most of us, as taxpayers, abide by the rules and the laws every day, but we have a few bad actors that want to come in here and take advantage of our city and how nice and sweet these people are in this city, all of us. Oh, I'm sorry, this is gonna take 3 hours to go through, but I'll be real fast. I am 100% in favor of code enforcement. We need it badly. It's a support, it's a promise to the businesses, it's the promises to the citizens and the taxpayer of this town, and we need these ordinances enforced. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. We need to stay on time too, folks. We only have 1 hour to get all this done, so your turn. All right, here we
Here we
go.
go.
Oh, no more wild cards on that one? Okay. What does maintaining the quality of life in Prescott look like to you? How will you ensure a high quality of life for the citizenry?
Greg.
Well, this is very important to Prescott. It's why many people come to Prescott and choose Prescott. It's why we're on the top 5 lists. It's why we have the best air quality in the United States. And hopefully the Kirkland mine won't affect that negatively. I kind of agree with Phil on that. But I would say that the quality of life is a lot more than just the mountains and the trees and everything that we have around us in terms of the natural setting. I think it's the people that we have in our city, and it's how we keep the town, which I think we're doing a great job, but the downtown area is something that people are attracted to. It's the friendliness of our town and the good neighbors that we have and how we treat people. And I have been the recipient of this, and I believe it's very, very important that we continue to maintain that quality of life in our city. It also involves essential services, emergency services like police and fire. And that's why I supported 443. We've got to make sure that we take care of police and fire so that we have those folks when we need them the most. And so it's very important that we support police and fire. And so I think there's a lot of things that we can do to continue to maintain that quality of life. I think it's very, very important, especially when we look at these new developments, that they fit within the same quality of life that we currently have here in Prescott.
Thank you.
Any wild cards?
On quality of life in Prescott. Any wild cards? Okay.
Okay. How can we assure there's enough water for Prescott to continue to grow? And that goes to
Connie.
Well, this is a topic that we are all very familiar with, and I know I've been doing a lot of studying on the details surrounding a lot of this and the engineering of it. I do believe people are going to come here. We live in a free country. We're not going to be able to stop them. We've got to manage the growth, as we've all said before. Water is a very, very important part of this growth. I think what we've got to do, there's a lot of new technology out there that we haven't really tapped into in this city. CWAG, I would have to say, would be on the most, as far as local groups here, would be on the most cutting edge of what we should do. Some of their ideas are great, but I am in favor of the pipeline and a holding tank, and probably several holding tanks. I said this before in one of the forums about the groundwater issue. So I live right downtown in the historic area. We have a groundwater issue right now. I own several properties down there. I've had to install and replace sump pumps in properties that have not had a sump pump since the 1800s. So we right now are experiencing the groundwater level at an all-time high. If we had a way to harness that water that was here, and it is cyclical, we will go through a drought again, we would be so much further off, or better off, to have those holding tanks and be able to tap into that water when we need it. So when the water levels are down, we've got a backup plan. And I think that's our only way to be able to handle the growth and handle the citizens that are here. And that's going to take some forward-thinking people, some engineering, and some money. So be prepared for that one. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a wild card.
Wild card?
Oh. Thank you, Steve.
Just want to address the simple fact that being on the water committees all over the state for the last 16 years myself, that Prescott has hands down done more for our water situation than any other community in the state of Arizona. And we continue to do that. We have a great water policy. The state of Arizona needs to step up, and as most folks would know, Yavapai County has a lot of wells within Yavapai County, and there is a way that they can give back to the aquifer if we just allow it to go forward. And that's putting in a dry well and recapturing water off the roof and putting it back into their recharge wells that go back into the aquifer. There's a lot of different things that can happen, but collectively the city of Prescott cannot do that by ourselves. So we need to work together with the state, the county, to bring in some new ideas and try to do a better job. And I do support the Chino Valley Pipeline.
Any more wild cards? Any takers? All right, here we go.
Okay.
The next question is, safety goes hand in hand with quality of life in Prescott. How will you ensure a safe environment in our city?
Greg.
Well, passing Proposition 443 was a big step to make sure that we fund that PSPRS and take care of our policemen. I think the other thing that's happened recently is Debbie Black's done a great job. She's our chief of police. Downtown, she now has patrols walking around downtown and even on bicycles. I saw them the other day on their bikes. And I think this is a great thing where we do more down in that area to have patrols walking around to make sure that we're paying attention to what's going on and enforcing those statutes down there that we need to make sure are enforced so that we keep that area safe. I also am looking at some different ways to clean up panhandling and those kinds of things and those kinds of activities. I love what the council's already done with sober living. I think they've taken some great strides, and we need to continue to keep our finger on that to make sure that we keep a handle on sober living homes so we don't see that crop back up again and get into those large numbers that we had before. So for the most part, I think we do have a safe town, but we just need to continue to be diligent and support our police and make sure we're doing those things to make sure that all our laws are enforced.
Any wild cards? Honey?
Really doesn't want to get me every time. On the issue of safety, I think in order to be safe, we have to recognize the threat. And, you know, again, living downtown, I feel like, and I've told this to many people, I feel like I've lived in ground zero for the proliferation of the drug rehab businesses. We have been taken advantage of in this city. This is my opinion. Everybody can refute this if they want. But we have had in the past just a proliferation of this problem, and it has changed our neighborhoods. It's changed the fabric of our neighborhoods in a very big way. So in order to place policemen downtown to keep us safe, I think we've got to stop the well, if you will, of these people pouring into our country or into our city. What it's done to us downtown has just been just unheard of. And I'll tell you what, 7-10 years ago, our crime rate was very low. You have now seen in the last 8 years a 50% rise in crime, and that's got to be taken care of. And you also have the Department of Corrections bringing close to 1,000 people to resettle here every year. These are issues that we've got to look at, or we're going to be overtaken by this whole thing. So I am on the committee right now for Sober Living Homes. I'm going to stay very active in that issue.
Thank you. Any wild cards? Wild cards? No? All righty. Oh, we're getting down. Here we go. Next question. I like this one. What or who were the greatest influences in your life who made you the person you are today?
Steve.
All right.
That's always a great question. You know, you look around and you gotta try to figure out why you're here. Yeah. So I'd have to say my parents, number one. My mom told me that I about put her in the crazy house many times. But however, and as Lamerson would say, that she didn't whip me hard enough. But you know, I think just the community in itself at large had a great influence. And again, growing up here in 1974, you had to create your own entertainment. And sometimes that wasn't real good if you saw yourself in the back of a police car later that evening. But I have to say they handled it a lot differently. In today's world, they take you to juvenile detention center because the parents don't seem to care about their kids as much as they did when I was growing up. What they did when I was growing up, they'd take you in front of the house, turn on the lights and siren at 1 o'clock in the morning, and your mom and dad handled the problem with you the next day. And I also could say that, you know, from time to time, we were juvenile delinquents. We would throw tomatoes at things, and a police officer pulled us over, and we had hidden the tomatoes, but there was one in the back of the truck that was rotten. And he says, now if you eat this tomato, he says, we'll let you go home. So unfortunately, me being the guy that didn't want to have the patrol siren go off in front of the house again, I ate the rotten tomatoes. That's one thing people don't know about me either. I would have to say my parents were my greatest influences. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any wild cards?
Okay, next name.
Oh, no, next, first question.
Oh, that's right. I want to hear that question from everybody.
I know.
You guys should give, no, never mind.
So that was one of the 2 easy
Yeah, I
ones.
love that. Maybe in your closing statements.
Some people look at Prescott as a retirement community. How can we ensure Prescott is more than just a place for retirees?
Phil?
Well, there's a lot of discussion about economic development, but we have to recognize the fact that primarily we are a retirement destination. In addition to that, tourism has a big, big impact on our quality of life and our financial viability as a city. So those things have to be enhanced and protected. If we grow too much, if we increase our tax burden too much, there's a lot of people that won't want to come here. We can, I think, pretty much rely on the tourism. We have a phenomenally gifted historical record that brings people here, the beauty of our area and the surrounding communities. We can continue to protect and enhance. But retirement is important, so I don't want to diminish it by giving too much emphasis on economic development. We need to support that. We need to grow it. We need to grow the right kinds of development so they don't bring in more congestion and more traffic. So that's why I support some of this technology development, cybersecurity, which we're going to have a big symposium tomorrow out at Embry-Riddle. And those are the kinds of things that we need to spend time on. They can contribute to the city without a negative impact on congestion and traffic. So I'm a big supporter of retirement. If it wasn't for a retirement community, I probably wouldn't be here. So I think that's great, and along with everybody in Las Fuentes.
Rebuttal?
Wild card?
Wild card, anybody? No? Okay. I want to say something, but I won't. It's hard for all of us, right, to sit out there and be quiet. So, you know what? We do live in a great place. In regards to the Quad Cities / towns, what ideas do you have to bring greater cooperation to our region?
Feel good.
You just-
Yeah,
just-
yeah,
Sorry,
but
I
she
put that
just
back
had to
up.
put
You-
the
okay.
phone, I had to put it back, so you.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm a big supporter of that. We're growing to the extent that the Quad Cities now are virtually overlapping each other. For many, many years, each community has kind of looked at the other one as a competitor. The leadership in those committees, in those communities have been reluctant to make decisions that are seen as perhaps favoring another community over them. So there's been very little cooperation and a lot of competition, and that has to stop. We've got big challenges here with our water resource management that we're going to need all the cities to come together and make decisions on these big, big challenges, whether it's the big Chino pipeline, managing the Very River. The same thing can be said about the airport. You know, that's a regional resource, and it will benefit every one of our communities. So each of those communities needs to participate and realize that a rising tide lifts all boats. So I've talked to Darrell Croft in Chino Valley about this issue. I have a meeting next week with Harvey Skoog in Prescott Valley. I've met with Larry Tarkowski, their city manager there. And I'm trying to build a consensus that we really need to get together and not compete and cooperate. And I think if we can do that, our future is going to be much brighter.
Thank you, Tom. Any wild cards on that one? Okay, we got a wild card.
Steve Blair.
Well, I appreciate some of what Bill has to say to be true, but first of all, the cities of Prescott, we are a city, the other three are towns, so sometimes I'm taken back by the Quad Cities because there's only really one city, and that's the city of Prescott. The rest of the town of Prescott Valley, town of Dewey Humboldt, and the town of Chino Valley. However, I do want to say that all four of us meet regularly on water issues throughout the state of Arizona. Of three of the water committees that I'm on, so are the folks from those other three communities. Also, we do communicate. Somebody said it couldn't be done when I first got on council, and we put together a regional dispatch center that includes Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, Dewey Humboldt, Prescott. It includes the whole region, and we came together as one group of people to save the citizens money and to provide a better service. So yes, we have done it, and yes, we can do it again.
Any wild cards?
No wild cards?
Okay.
Next question. The biggest issue in the primary was Prop 443. What was your position on Prop 443 and why?
Connie?
I supported the Prop 443. In the beginning, I have to admit, I was very leery about the whole issue. Understanding, I think what happened, just like everybody else, when I heard that word bankruptcy, I was a little alarmed by that. So I did a lot of investigating, and of course I realized that Prescott wouldn't even qualify to file for bankruptcy. But I also did a lot of investigating with the legislature. And although we do have Representative Stringer now and Noel Campbell going down there with the ad hoc committee and basically raising awareness, that's going to take some time. So my common sense thought was, we've really got to get a grip on this right now because it is spiraling out of control. We can do it now at 78 or 81 million dollars, but we may not be able to in the future when it grows to 123 million in 2 years and then up and up and up. And away it goes. If we're going to sit and wait for the legislature to stand up and admit they made a mistake, it's not going to happen. As I've said, and there is no history of that, by the way. If you actually research what the legislature has done, they have never stood up and said, whoops, we're going to change our mind. We've made a mistake. So that isn't going to happen. What I suspect is going to happen, like a lot of things, is going to get modified. And I'm welcoming the modification on that. I have a son who's a firefighter. He's in the Tier 1. He's got 3 children. He's going to be retired in 9 to 10 years. And that is a promise that these municipalities have made to these fire department, the firemen and the policemen. So we need to go through with that. We do need to get a handle on this, but we have to go into this with our eyes wide open. We have to know that the board is still making bad decisions on their investments. We could be right back to ground zero in no time if something happens in this country, but it's a risk that we all have to take.
Any wild cards? No one's touching that one. Okay, we got a taker.
Well, as you know, I was the only city council candidate that did not support 443. Primarily because I felt it was bad tax policy. It wasn't written strictly enough to make sure absolutely that those dollars would be used in addition to the amount that the city was already paying for the unfunded liability. And secondly, I thought the timing was bad because both of our representatives, Stringer and Campbell, were working and had been given the authority by the legislature to address this problem statewide. And the negative consequences are happening. I talked to Noel last week, and he said that already PSPRS, the representatives, are refusing to attend these ad hoc committees now that they've seen Prescott has passed this tax. So this issue isn't going to go away. It needs statewide reform, but at least you can count on me to make sure those tax dollars from 443 are spent the way they're intended to.
Any wild cards? 443 wild cards? Okay.
There we go. Next to last question. Of all the questions you have been asked, what is the one question you wished you had been asked, and what is your answer?
Greg?
All right. You've been asked a lot of questions since you've run for mayor. What's the one you wish you had been asked, or maybe even just today?
Well, I'm a big family man. We have 9 children, and I have an amazing wife, as you would imagine. And that is really what fuels my campaign. When you talked about influence, and I was thinking about jumping in, so now I'll do that. In 1912, my great-grandfather immigrated from Italy to Kansas, and he worked coal mines and on the farm. And I had the opportunity to spend time with him and to hear his stories. And I think more than anything, that has motivated me the most, to see his work ethic and what he did while he was working in the coal mine during the day and on the farm at night, and what he was able to accumulate out of sheer hard work, because he could not read or write when he got to this country. Yet he went through the proper channels, was immigrated, and he is a huge role model to me. Second person that I would mention in terms of influence would be my father, who passed away just a year ago. And he was a huge influence in my life. He was a high school football coach and a pastor, and again, great work ethic. We have a very strong family, Italian family, and I'm very grateful for that influence, and I'm very grateful that my mom is here today as well.
Any wild cards? I think we are out lot of wild cards except for Greg, and he wouldn't wild card himself, would he?
Yep. He does.
We do have one last question before we go into the closing remarks. What are the next steps for Prescott Airport?
Steve?
Well, the next steps are in process right now. We're working on our airport master plan. We've had several meetings, and I get aggravated with government sometimes. We've been talking about the airport issues for 16 years that I've been on council. And I think finally we're getting off the dime to enlarge the runway so we can actually be legal to have our liners out there that provide the slurry base operation, and to provide travel commitments on an airline that keeps their times right. I've flown on that airline and got stranded in San Diego for 2 days because they weren't flying back. So hopefully, here in the near future, you will find out that this city council is committed to building a new terminal and enlarging the runway to help commerce, population, quality of life, you name it. The airport is a pin that will do that, and I am full support of that happening sooner than later. So it's a transportation key that's needed in Prescott. I-17 keeps getting worse and worse and worse. Every day you drive on it, you're stuck or you're slow. And I'd love to be able to get on an airplane here, go through really small checkout, get on a plane, fly to Phoenix for my connecting flight. That would be absolutely heaven for me. So we're working on that, and also to bring in commerce, maybe a FedEx shipping terminal or a UPS shipping terminal out there as well would be very good. So I support the airport 100%.
Okay, I think we have a wild card.
You want to use both of them or save one for your?
I'll save one.
You save one, absolutely. Okay, there you go. We have to budget this.
I'm a big proponent of the airport. I always say if Valdosta, Georgia, a small town in rural Georgia, can have a regional airport, why can't we? We do not have an interstate. We do not have a railroad. We do not have a port. This is our major way to move goods in and out of our city as well as people. Steve mentioned I-17 is several times given people trouble. I know people go down and spend the night before their flight just to make sure that they're there on time. And so it's really not going to be that difficult to improve the airport and to get regional jet service in here. I don't believe I would be committed to that on the council, and look forward to working with the council to do that.
Thank you. Okay, now we go into our final closing remarks. Billy?
So closing remarks for each candidate, they will have 1 1/2 minutes each. And Greg, I think you're the only leftover wild card, so you will have 2 minutes and 15 seconds. So why don't we draw a name? We'll do this again at random.
Greg?
Okay.
So, Jade, 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Well, I'm very excited to be here today. Thank you so much for coming out and listening to us here in this forum. I believe that I am the best candidate to be your next mayor, and really it boils down to a handful of things. Number one, just my small town values. Growing up in Kansas, I really understand Prescott, I believe, because I grew up with those kinds of small town values, so I understand what it means to be a good neighbor and the hard work ethic and all those kinds of things. I have a resource management degree from Kansas State University, and that really helps me understand how to manage all kinds of resources, people resources and financial resources and human resources and those kinds of things. My business experience, I'm at United Christian Youth Camp here in town. I've been the director for 22 years. So this really sets me apart from my opponent, I believe, and that is that I understand what it takes to run a business in this town. I've done it for 22 years. We've grown our business from $400,000 of annual revenue to now $4 million. So I know what it takes to manage 200 people on a payroll and to meet that payroll. So I think it's very important. My public service experience with the school board here in town. I'm the president of the local school board, and I believe that public service experience gives me the kind of experience to manage those large budgets and to know what it takes to lead a board in that case, and also to work with our superintendent. And so those kinds of experiences, I believe, are very, very important. And so I think all of that together really sets me apart from my opponent. I believe those are all great things that'll help me to be your next mayor. But beyond all that, I really believe it's the fact that I really know and understand Prescott. Tonight is homecoming football game, Friday Night Lights. I have my daughter's, she's a cheerleader, I have her pin on tonight. And it's those nights that I cherish so much, to be in our town and to see all the people come out and to support our town on a Friday night. And if you've never done that, you totally don't fully understand what Prescott is. And I believe I know and I understand Prescott. I've been here for 22 years, and I know what it takes to make sure we maintain our quality of life and to make sure that we continue to enjoy our beautiful town. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you, everybody, for coming, and thank you, RWAP, for having it. I feel like I'm talking to warm faces I see quite often. And most people know that I was born and raised here, and somebody had asked me, why are you running for council again? And it's not for the paycheck. Trust me, it's not. It's because of the passion of the community. You know, I still have that almighty desire to serve the community. I believe institutional knowledge of the past of Prescott. And when I started talking about railroads in Prescott and all the things that were near and dear to my heart being a kid, some people would look at me and say, there was railroads in Prescott? So, you know, that history of what goes along with the community is sometimes important. And as long as I have the energy and the, I guess you would say, the feeling of wanting to do well for the community, I will continue to ask for your vote. So I'm here to ask for your vote, and thank you for coming this evening.
Thanks again for coming, everybody. It's nice to see people actually get informed on some of these voting issues. Sandra Laney's sitting right over there. She's my campaign manager, and after we came in fourth in the election, we had to sit down, and I really had to take a hard look at whether I was going to go forward or not. I did consider stepping away, but I've decided, you know what, I'm very committed to this city. I've seen this city before when I lived here back in the 80s, when my parents moved here in the 70s. Fast forward when I moved back downtown almost 14 years ago, the changes, that's what spurred me on. I'm hoping that the city, the voters of the city will recognize my experience of 35 years in business, my vision. If you want to know vision, look at my website. Look at some of the projects I've done downtown. I am very heavy into preservation. I want to preserve our history in this town. I want to make it better. I want to make it safe for my 12 grandkids to walk to the square. It's got to go back to the way it was, because right now we are on the verge of losing it. We've made a lot of headway with this drug addiction problem. But coming from 57 recovering addicts on my street 4 years ago down to 7, that is a great improvement. And I'm going to tell you, unless you live in Ground Zero, right downtown in the historic area, you don't see it as much as we do down there and how it's really changed the neighborhoods. So I'm hoping that you'll vote for me. If you love Prescott and you love the history, come and look at what I've done single-handedly. I've renovated 8 projects in the historic area downtown by myself, 1 in Prescott Valley. Wasn't near as, no offense to Prescott Valley, but it was very rewarding to bring back that very old church on the corner of Cortez and Carlton and that 1883 house as one of the 7 and 8 that I've done downtown. You need to drive by and look. That's what I can offer to the city. That's what I can offer to you. Take advantage of my 35 years in business. Thank you.
Well, I also want to thank you all for coming out. I know there was a lot of energy in the original primary race, and to try to regenerate that is difficult as we go to the general election. I want to thank RWAP for putting this together, and this is a Republican-sponsored event. And one of the things that hasn't been talked about hardly at all in this race is our partisan credentials. Now, I realize that this is a nonpartisan race, and most of the things that we do, whether it's fixing potholes or making sure our sewers are run correctly, or not have anything to do with partisanship. But when it comes to being